What's going on, y'all? It's Yeti from Yeti Machine Company. Been a little bit. I've been busy raising children. I already made them about 9 months ago. The last one was just born and he's happy and healthy. Mom's recovering, so we're back in the shop. We're wrenching. Today, I'm gonna be going over how to build or rebuild your front suspension on an FXR. This also works for earlier dynas, earlier Sportsters, anything with a 39mm front end. And it's actually pretty similar to most Harley front ends, except the inverted front ends are a little bit different. But your 35mm, 39mm, your 49mm, 41mm, they're all very similar. But today, we're gonna focus on our 39mm. So, first things first, I'm gonna go over parts and tools that we need. This is not like a Bible for exactly what you need. This is what I use. There's different ways to skin a cat. For the 39mm fork rebuild, this is what you're gonna need. So as far as parts go, I actually got a full rebuild kit. If you're just doing seals, you can buy the fork seals, but because I'm swapping to new components, I actually got new bushings and clips and all that. You're gonna need fork oil. Really depends on the weight of the rider and the riding style. I'm running a heavier oil in this one. For the rebuild, you may not need new spacers, but because we're running longer fork tubes, I'm gonna need to cut new spacers. We're actually going to be using a Schedule 80 PVC pipe. A lot of the kits come with a Schedule 40. I like the Schedule 80 because it's thicker and it's really not that much more expensive. You're going to need a flathead screwdriver for popping the clips in the beauty ring. You're also going to need some type of 6mm Allen wrench. A lot of people don't know this, but 39mm suspension is actually built by a company called Showa in Japan. So your hardware is actually going to be metric. I've seen a lot of this hardware stripped because somebody tried to use a standard size that fit and strip the bolt out. So make sure you have a 6mm Allen wrench to get that bolt loose. You're gonna need some type of fork seal driver kit, whether you make one out of PVC pipe or whatever. You're gonna wanna use a fork seal driver. This is, I don't even know what company makes this, but basically this one does 39mm and 49mm, kind of everything in between. If you have factory fork tubes, then you can go off the factory manual for as far as fluid capacity. In this situation, we're running longer fork tubes, and so that amount is not going to work because the fork tube's longer. So what I like to do is I like to use one of these level syringes. I usually set Harleys somewhere around 150 to 160 millimeters from the top. That way, if you have a stock length, 2-inch over, 6-inch over, it doesn't matter because you're setting the fluid level from the top of the fork tube. It's always worked for me. I've never had an issue. These little syringe kits are like 10 to 15 bucks on Amazon or most aftermarket like motorcycle shops. And that's pretty much it. It's really not a lot of tools to do these. So yeah, let's get into it. What's going on, y'all? It's Yeti from Yeti Machine Company. If you're watching this, I appreciate you. If you do already subscribe to my page, awesome. If not, go subscribe, go give it a like. Also, just so you know, if you check out the link up top, got my website up there. I got shirts, I got hats, I got all kinds of cool stuff. So hit that up, get a shirt, support me. Thanks, y'all. I personally like to purchase the full rebuild kit because it comes with everything you need. So we've got in this bag, we'll just open it up here. We've got our dust cover, we've got our actual fork seal, we've got our slider bushing, our fork tube bushing. We also have our dampener hardware. We've got, the dampener bushings. We've got our fork cap seal, our washer, and our C-clip. Different eras use different parts. So like you have a couple different types of dampener bushings. It really depends on the year and if it's a Sportster or an FXR. But most of the time these kits are going to come with everything you need for either or. We're not going to use every single part in this kit. We're also changing to some chrome lowers, you know, just to spice up the front end. Maybe we'll show a little bit later what the front end's gonna look like. This thing's it's got chrome triple trees. We've also got a new set of fork tubes. These are 2 inches taller than the factory. These are brand new. So first things first, what we're gonna do is break down the old front end. And like I said, we're basically taking the guts and internals out of that front end and putting it into all of our new stuff. So that's what we're gonna do. This is one of the old fork tubes that came off of this bike. As you can see, it was leaking. This thing's been rattle can and it just kind of looks like shit. So first thing when you're disassembling these, you're gonna wanna do is break this screw loose. You're going to want to make sure you do this first so that you keep spring pressure against the screw, and that way you don't risk the dampener tube spinning while you're doing it. Also, at some point in this bike's life, somebody put these fork caps on here. Here, I'll just pop this off. They usually don't come off that loose. I already did it off camera. So these are little extension caps. I don't like them. I've never had a front end feel as stable after running these. This is kind of like a cheap way to give yourself a little bit of fork extension. Anyways, that's off there. You're gonna wanna drain all your fluid. This thing probably doesn't have a lot of fluid in it. Also, this is gonna be messy. There's not a lot you can do about it. You wanna get all much fluid out as you can. Our dampening rod fell out. You can see, I don't even know what this thing's got going on in it. Looks like we've got some...
Is that like the tracker die kit?
It might be, actually. I'm not sure. Yeah, these are definitely not factory dampening tubes. So, no biggie. Just gonna flip this bad boy around. When you're doing this, be careful. Try not to scratch these lowers. I don't really care about these ones specifically, but I'll probably end up using them for something else, like shaving. Some of these bikes have these dust covers, some don't. Usually there's a little notch in the lower. You can get in there and pry these up. Be careful, because it's pretty hard not to damage these. So you're going to want to get in there and carefully pry up. Just take your time. Try not to gouge your shit too bad. Slowly pry these bad girls up. They can get pretty packed with dirt and grime. There we go. All right. So this is just a beauty cover. I'll probably clean the paint and shit off of there and reuse these. So next thing you're gonna do is pop your dust cover off. This is just like a preliminary seal. Now, one thing I would recommend if this is your first time doing one of these front ends is pay really close attention to how this stuff stacks up. 9 times out of 10, whoever did it before did it correctly, but we're gonna find out right now if they did or not. So the next thing is you have this big C-clip. You can just get in there with a small screwdriver, find this little bump, pop it out of the groove. Next thing we're going to do is actually use the fork tube, pop the seal out. So as you can see on this stack up is correct. So we have our fork tube bushing. This is what actually rides inside the tube. Then you have the fork slider bushing. This sits in the slider. Then you have this big washer. Then you have the fork seal. So for the fork seal, it's actually hard to tell by looking at it. There is a right way and a wrong way to do these. So if you see right here, we have this deeper lip with the spring. That's always going to be facing down. The smaller lip is going to be facing up. So that's it for disassembly. There is one more little piece that usually comes out with the dampener. Sometimes they do get stuck. Let's see if we can get it out. There it is. This guy is just like an aluminum bushing. This sits on the end of the dampener. You do not want to forget this. So this sits on that. Next thing we're going to do is clean up all the parts that we're going to reuse. You want to make sure you try to clean everything as well as possible. It doesn't have to be like, you know, surgically clean, but the cleaner the better. You want it the smallest amount of the old fork oil and the old gunk in the new setup. So I like to use just good old brake parts cleaner. This is really good for just kind of knocking the oil off. Obviously make sure you clean the brake parts cleaner off of it once you're done. You know, like I said, it doesn't have to be like surgically clean. Just take a rag, try to get all the old crust off of this thing. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
5 minutes later.
All right, so we've got all of our parts cleaned up. First thing we're gonna do is take your fork tube bushing. It's got a split in it, so that allows it to spread out when you're putting it on there. Just kind of work it over. Boop, pops right into position. Make sure you put, this is your rebound spring, so as the fork tube comes up, it's hitting against this spring. Make sure you change your dampener bushing. You want to pay attention to which style yours uses. I know that it uses this white one, so we're going to put our new dampener bushing on there. Make sure it doesn't catch or do anything weird. We're going to put a little bit of oil on there. We've got the spring back on there. We've got the new dampener bushing. What we're going to do, we got the bushing on the end of the tube. We're going to drop our dampening rod and our spring through. Sometimes this will fight you a little bit. You gotta kind of watch it. But now that that's through, that's where it needs to go. Next thing we're going to do is take our spring. Now this is the spring that came out of it. There's nothing wrong with this spring, although this spring was actually in there backwards. On these bikes, you want to put the coils that are more tightly wound towards the bottom. Ones that have more space towards the top. So this guy's going to go in there like that. Now if you notice, we've got a bunch of space in between there. So if we were to just put our fork cap on, what's going to happen? It's going to actually shrink this down. So we're going to take our spacer material. We're going to take this washer. I'm going to put this washer in there first. Make sure it sits on the spring nice and tight. Again, this is all depends on the rider, the type of bike, how heavy the person is. For a good rule of thumb, I like to go about 3/4 of an inch over the top of the tube. That gives us a little bit of preload on that spring. Again, it depends on the bike, depends on the rider, but that's kind of where I usually start from. And again, you're not cranking the shit out of this thing. Just using this rag to kind of hold it. We've got our washer in there, our spring in there. We're going to measure. Again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but you want to get them even. I'm going to measure about 3/4 over. Take your tube out. Now you know where you need to cut. Now, a smart man would have made sure that he had a PVC cutter, but mine has since disappeared. So I'm just going to use a cutoff wheel real quick and chop that section apart. Looks all good to me. Take your knife or your file. Make sure you knock the burrs off the edge. You can use a file or a deburr knife, but my good old Spyderco works just fine. One thing you're going to want to do, just to save yourself hassle with when you're doing the second one, is take a measurement. So I know I'm at 4 3/4. So we're going to cut our other spacer to be 4 3/4 when we go to do that. That way you don't have to measure it both times. So next step, your spring's in there, your washer's in there, you got your spacer cut. This, put your washer. You're going to take your top cap. Now this is not your final installation of this fork cap. You just want to put tension on the spring. You don't got to crank the shit out of these. You just want it to be tight. And now we've got our spring putting tension on our dampening tube. That makes our lives easier for the next step. So obviously now we've got some preload on the spring. So the next step, you want to make sure that when you take the original screw out that this little washer comes with it. I've seen it a couple times where guys will get the screw out not realizing that the washer that's supposed to seal it is stuck down inside the tube. Sometimes they're a bitch to get out because they've been smashed down, they've been over torqued. You got to get in there with a pick, peel them out, because you will have a leak. If you leave that old washer there and you put the new one in, 9 times out of 10 you get a leak. Ask me how I know. Take this guy, take our fork tube, pop our slider over, bada boom, bada bing. We've got our hardware. That is going to go on the end of our impact. Okay. Like I said, if you don't have the spring pressure on the bottom of that dampener tube, a lot of the times when you go to tighten up that screw, it'll actually spin the whole unit. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to take our slider bushing, slide it over the tube, just like how it came off. We know that it went bushing and then washer and then fork seal. I'm going to take our big washer, that slides over that like that. And then we're going to take our seal. Again, remember, you want to put this bigger lip towards the bottom. Take a little bit of your fork oil. Make sure you get that seal nice and slippery. You're going to take your time, be very careful. You don't want to rip the edge of the seal. Just work it over that edge. It's going to slide right down that fork tube. Now, we're going to take our fork seal driver. So we've got this attachment here. We've got the hammer portion. You can put it on the ground with a rag, or you can, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it. I'm going to try to do it on this chair. Basically, you're going to use that fork seal driver. You want to get the fork past the lip so that it holds the driver. And you're just going to jam the whole thing home. Now you'll know that it's down far enough, but see that little lip? That's where the O-ring for, or not the O-ring, that's where the C-clip for that holds the seal in is gonna stay. So you can reuse your old C-clip, but we have the new stuff already. So take your new C-clip, slides over the top, and then you can use a screwdriver. I like to just kind of use my hand and just kind of work it down in there. Once you get them all started, you can go back in, pop it into the lip. So it's going to sound counterproductive. Next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to take it back apart. The reason why we're going to do that is going to be shown here soon. But it will send shit into fucking orbit if you don't pay attention. We're going to take our whole setup apart here. The reason being because we need to set our fluid and our fluid level. The Harley manual has a number that you're going to use for the amount of fluid that you put in, but if you paid attention, we put 2 over fork tubes on this thing, and so that fluid level is actually going to look a little bit different than the factory level. You can find these on Amazon, online. It's basically just a fork fluid level. If you want it to be a little bit more of a stiffer front suspension, stiffer dampening, you're going to run a little bit more fluid. Less fluid means looser dampening. I've had good success with setting the fluid level to be 150 millimeters from the top. So, you know, again, play with it. But this is what I like to do. So what I'll do is I'll take my pint, pour it into my dampener. It's going to fill up pretty quick. Now, when you start getting close, what you want to do is work the suspension up and down while you're looking down the tube. Go nice and slow. It's going to be hard to catch it on the camera, but you want to make sure that you work out all the air bubbles that are in the suspension, because that's going to give you a false fluid level. So take your time, work this up and down until you stop seeing bubbles. And you'll know, because right, like where I poured it in to where it is now, the fluid level is way lower because it's actually pulled oil down into the bottom of that dampener. But then, since we've set our fluid level, I'm going to take this guy, set it down in here, and slowly pull fluid. Now when you're setting this fluid level, you're going to do it with the fork tube all the way up, okay? No spring, no spacer, no nothing. Just the fork tube and the fork slider and your fluid. And this tool really makes it easy to set your fluid level. But I've used this thing like 20 times and not had any issues. All right, so now we're sucking air. We know that the fluid is 150 millimeters from the top. So now that we've got our fluid level set, we can take our spring, drop it back on in there, washer, our spacer, and our other washer. This kit comes with new O-rings for the fork cap. These are the old ones. Probably would work, but I've got new ones, so I'm going to use them. And same thing with the with these O-rings. Just dab a little bit of oil on your finger. Oil up your threads, oil up your O-ring. You just don't want to rip the O-ring or get it caught on anything. So a smart man would have the right size ratchet. I don't have it on me right now. So we're going to do this by hand again. Make sure that's tight. Just need to get it started. Okay. Alrighty. Now I'll do my final torque on these fork caps once this fork is installed on the bike, because we'll have something good clamping onto the fork tube. But that's tight enough for what we need now. So yeah, that's it. The only other thing is you have your dust cap. That's a pretty simple installation. I want to wipe this shit off a little bit so it doesn't trap that dirt. Just be careful. This you can usually work down with your fingers. That's it. So that is how you rebuild a 39mm front end. So once you're done with your first one, you just got to do the same thing a second time. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Just requires a few special tools, but nothing major. If you guys like watching this video, do me a favor, leave a comment, subscribe, like the video, ask some questions. There probably is something that I missed in there. I'm definitely a mechanic first and a YouTuber second. So talking myself through things sometimes makes me feel and look stupid. So anyways, if you guys want to support me, do me a favor, go check out my website. It's www.yetimachinecode.com. Follow me on all social media. It's @YetiMachineCo. See you guys on the road.